Thank you for joining us for Working Through the Word, a ministry of the Richmond Church of Christ.
He said at least one thing right. I am not a preacher, at least any more or any less than any of you are. And that's a wonderful thing that we're able to be part of together. I'm honored and blessed to be here with you and pray our time's good and honoring to our God. So let's talk just a little bit about worship. Worship is an interesting thing, perhaps a misunderstood thing. For years, I worked with two wonderful women, and we shared a workspace together. But these two women just happened to be associated with the same church. And they were close enough to me that in the office space, if you will, that when they were talking, I could hear. I mean, you didn't have to eavesdrop. We were just all in the same basic room. Very commonly on Monday morning, they would have a conversation. One of them was not present with the church over the weekend and would ask the question, "Did you go to church?" And without exception, if the other party had gone, if they answered, "Yes, I was there," there was an instant question. And the question was it good? This didn't happen once. This conversation took place almost weekly. And it told me something. It got my attention, and I think you can appreciate where that thought is going, because there are some people who look at Sundays as nothing more than an opportunity to see a good show about God. And what they hope to receive is some joy from a talented musical display, maybe a comedic video, maybe a hip presentation. Don't worry, you get none of that today. But there's a flip side to that coin that's equally bad. And the flip side of that coin is there are some people who look at Sundays as nothing more than an opportunity to put on a show for God. And that flip side of the coin is muscle memory. It's just going through a pre-lunch checklist. Worship is 5 traditional things, and as long as I go through 5 traditional things, I have worshiped. I'd submit to you those are two sides of the same coin. Those are both misrepresentations of what worship is. Worship is a very complex thing that unfortunately I think we're human. I'm not pointing a finger at anybody here. This is me as well. Listen, we get up and we hustle about and we rush to arrive at a house of worship. And sometimes in our haste to do that, it's at least possible that we reduce worship to a location. Something we do. There is a passage of Scripture that will help us, I believe. It's a passage of Scripture that's actually about Jesus. But inside the conversation, there is an emphasis placed on one idea. Let's turn together to John chapter 4. John chapter 4. Bible class time, I'd ask somebody to read John chapter 4, beginning verse 19. We'll read through verse 26. John chapter 4, 19 through 26.
The woman said to him, "Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, and you Jews say that in Jerusalem
Please keep
is a
going.
place where one ought to worship." Jesus said to her, "Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when you will neither worship on this mountain or in Jerusalem worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. You know what we worship, salvation is of Jews. But the hour is coming, and now is, when the true worshiper will worship the Father in spirit and truth, for the Father is seeking such to worship him. God is a spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and in truth. The woman said to him, I know the Messiah is coming, who is called Christ. When he comes, he will tell us all things. Jesus said to her, I who speak to you am he.
Thank you. Did you notice something? Our Father worshiped. The place people ought to worship. You will neither worship on this mountain. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know. True worshipers will worship. God's seeking such to worship him. Those who worship him must worship him. Did you get the idea of what they're talking about? 10 times in 5 verses, worship. All right, it's hard to miss that point. You have to really ignore the context to not understand there is something of significance about worship. Now, interestingly enough, whenever we dig into the information here, it begins with the irrelevant factor, the location. That was the hot dispute between the Samaritans and the Jews, to which Jesus essentially says, you people need to really understand it's time for you to get off your mountains. Because worship is not going to be something that happens on Moriah in Jerusalem, Gerizim in Samaria. No, worship, it doesn't matter where it happens. You need to understand it's all getting ready to change, because true worship is on the horizon. And true worship is something that's a balance of 2 things. True worshipers will worship in spirit and in truth. See? Bible class over. Spirit and truth. Now, let's rethink about those. That means there is a part of worship, forgive the formatting, that is easy. Worship in truth. I say it's easy because of the way truth is used in the book of John, particularly verse 17, where Jesus is praying, and Jesus says, sanctify them in your truth, your word is truth. So if one can read, one can worship in truth, because truth is nothing more than forming, molding the actions in keeping with what God has prescribed. That's easy. I mean, that's how we do anything in life. We pull out the guide, we read the directions, and we go through it. Now, it's important that we do it that way, because the Bible's very clear. Whenever we tinker with things and go into this self-made religion, Colossians 2:23, we'll worship, the King James says, worship that is unbidden or forbidden, worship that is self-created, self-imposed. What happens is we rob ourselves, because that passage says it's of no value to the worshiper. But on the other side of that, if we bring a human idea and we say this is how we're going to worship, the commandments of men rob God. In vain they worship me, teaching his doctrines, the commandments of men. So the truth is important, essential. But it's really the easy part, because the other part, I think, is harder. The other part's harder. Let's consider Mark chapter 12. I'm going to ask somebody to read again for us, if you don't mind. When we get to Mark chapter 12, let's have somebody read verse number 30. Jesus is asked, what's the great commandment of the law? That's the test that he's facing. And what's that answer? Have a volunteer to read for a mic?
I'll read. Mark 12:30. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. This is the first commandment.
All right, so let's think about this for just a minute. I would submit to you that the hard part of worship is spirit. And I would also have you to consider that spirit is a lot more than attitude. It's really easy, I think, for us to form this thing. Well, you worship with the right action and the right attitude, and that's biblical worship. And I think that's partly true, but I think it falls far short. And here's why. Consider how we're made. Genesis 1, 26 and 27, God said, let us make man how? In our image and after our likeness. What kind of likeness is that? What kind of image is that? It has nothing to do with flesh and bone. It's spirit. It's the part of us that's real. It's the part of us that's like God. It's the part of us that is eternal. It's the part of us that is the difference between a dead body and a live one. That's what spirit is. Spirit is a live body compared to a dead one. Whenever you do the math and you take all of the things out that's no longer possible, you know what spirit is. Jesus helps us, I think, in that great command question, because he says, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength. Let's put that in a single word, with all yourself. With all of you. So you will hear it. Perhaps you use the term. I've used it before. I believed that with every fiber of my being. You know that phrase? That's what worship in spirit is. I'm going to worship you with every fiber of my being. With my emotional self, my heart. With my spiritual self, my soul. With my intellectual self, my mind. And with the sacrifice of my will, my volition, my strength, or my might. With all of me. I'm going to worship with all of me. I'm going to engage that whole part of me. I'm going to worship in spirit. So that's more complex than an attitude. That's more complex than thinking, I'm going to worship when I do this. That is an investment of all of me. It's possible that if we don't leave a worship act tired, that we might set that as a standard. How much energy did it require? Well, I think whenever we worship God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, then I think that's worship in spirit. Every fiber of my being. Now, let's move on from this. I'm going to ask for somebody else to read here for us. You go ahead and raise your hand. We'll get the mic sent over to you. Consider that what Jesus says after he talks about these essential elements in balance is he points out that there is a worthy Father who is the recipient. So let's turn to Exodus chapter 34. Exodus chapter 34. You get to Exodus chapter 34, you are at the base of Sinai. Moses has come down. He's had the 10 Commandments from God in his hand. The people have made their calf. They're doing all kinds of horrible things. Moses comes down. He breaks the tablets, very likely, not because he's mad, not because he's careless, likely because the covenant's broken, the contract's gone. The people have said, we want nothing to do with this. So it's symbolic, even if that's not the reason he breaks them. But people are punished. And God essentially says, all right, Moses, it's time to get back on track. And Moses says, well, I will, but I really need some guarantee that you're with us this time. And he asks him, chapter 33, verse 18, show me your glory. And God basically says, I can't do that. But here's what I will do. Bring some tablets of stone up, come onto the mountain, I will proclaim my name to you. I'll give you a glimpse, but I will proclaim my glory to you. And that's the context where we're at. So the early morning discussion with God. Somebody have Exodus 34? Please read verse 6 and verse 7.
The Lord passed before him and proclaimed, the Lord, a God, merciful and gracious, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness, keeping steadfast love for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin, but who will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children and the children's children to the third and fourth generation.
May I ask you to read verse 8 as well, since we're there?
And Moses quickly bowed his head toward the earth and worshiped.
Perfect. Now I want you to reflect on that. In fact, I would encourage you to spend some time this week reflecting on that passage. And here's why. God says, Moses, come meet with me. And Moses gets up in the morning, he goes up on the mountain, and God says, what I'm going to do is tell you me. I'm not going to show you me necessarily. I want to tell you me. I'm going to proclaim my name. Now, if I were to ask you, what's the name of God? Would you have a list that's, 7 to 10 items long? Is that the name you would give God? Or would you just say, God? Yahweh? Well, notice that in the passage when the Lord begins to proclaim His name, He begins by describing His glory. And He does that by using both of the official names that the Old Testament uses in reference to God. And there are really only two. Everything else is a form of one of these two. The first is the Lord. Most translations, when they use that word in that way, will put it in all capital letters. Perhaps you have a translation in front of you that does the best it can to present to you what we think that name was said like, and that is Yahweh. What's that name? Well, He defined it to Moses in chapter 3, verse number 14, when Moses is saying, who shall I tell the people sent me to them? You tell them, well, first of all, He says, I am who I am. You tell them, I am has sent you to me. I am Yahweh. I am the Lord. I am eternal. I am. That eternal, timeless nature of God, that spiritual reality that exists outside of time, unbound by time, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. His eternal self. And He doubles it. A very typical Hebrew way of emphasis, but the Lord. The Lord. All right, so you might try that sometime. Jesus is on the cross and he's suffering, and how does He express that? My God. My God. You see, when you repeat something, it does something. When you do that with purpose, it hits a different note. And in essence, what He comes down, I mean, the Brandon Standard translation here, which is not credible. He comes down and proclaims His name, the Lord. And in case you don't know, Lord is, and He continues to flesh it out. He uses the second name, God. If you're reading your Bible and you see E-L in front of a name or a place, or at the end of a name or a place, it almost always is a reference to, as far as I know, God. It is His name. It's another of His names. In the beginning, God. It is a reference this time to His power. Not His timelessness, but His ability in His timeless nature to do anything that He wants. Anything within His control. He is absolutely sovereign. He has all control. Acts 17, we could read the passage, but 24 through 26, He made all things. He gives life, breath, and all things. He made of one blood all nations of the earth. He determined beforehand the times and the boundaries of their existence. God is sovereign. He is glorious. But that's not all He is. He's also goodness. And He breaks His goodness down in a listing of no less than 5 attributes. Merciful. He cares for His creatures. It's compassion. Gracious. He responds to their needs. That's grace. He is slow to anger. He endures with His creatures with patience. He provides for His creatures, abounding in steadfastness. Perhaps your translation says loving kindness. It's the idea of being a provider. And He is a God of absolute truth and integrity, abounding in faithfulness. He keeps His promises. Now you got to bear in mind that He ends that way to Moses, who's concerned that God is not with him. And I find that intriguing, because He reminds him, no, Moses, I told you I was going to be on board with this project. And I haven't changed my mind. And He reminds him just by expressing it within the context of His name. He says, I'm with you. I care about these people. I'm responding to their need. I'm enduring despite their provocation and rejection of me. I'm going to continue to provide for them. And I meant it when I said, I'm going to take you from Egypt and I'm going to give you a land. He's good. But He's also, well, I just hit the wrong thing on that, didn't I? He also is holy. He also is holy. Yeah, I turned it off completely. His holiness is expressed in 2 attributes. And those 2 attributes are, He keeps steadfast love in forgiveness. And He's not only forgiving in one way, He's forgiving in all ways. In fact, what God does is He says, I am forgiving, and He lists every possible source of guilt. He approaches it from the legal sense, iniquity. From the willful sense, the act of rebellion, transgression. The guilt of just the moral filth of it, sin. All 3 categories. When you see 3 things in sequence, it's saying every bit of it. I forgive, but His forgiveness is in balance with the uncomfortable part. He's just. He will not, He says, overlook the guilt. I will visit the guilt of the fathers upon the children and the children's children to the 3rd generation. Now that's troubling to us, but it shouldn't be, because notice it's in balance with all of the other attributes that He's already covered and discussed. There is nothing in the justice of God that contradicts His grace, because it is a manifestation of the same. Be holy, I am holy. That is a never-changing proposition. I am always holy, even whenever I am punishing iniquity. I can't help but punish iniquity because I am holy. But I love you enough, I'm going to make you a way through that holiness. It's completely consistent with God, whose justice is both kindness and severity, Romans 11:22. Fantastic. God says, I am a God of glory, I am a God of goodness, I am a God of holiness. Now, what's the response to that? You have in verse number 8 of that Exodus passage the response to all 3 of those ideas. Here's Moses, eager, early in the morning, having done work to get there, in the presence of God. and he is confronted with God's glory. And the text says he made haste. He got quickly. That is an expression that is represented that way. It's automatic. Have you watched, you'll be around a young mama and a child starts to cry? You see that response? That's what Moses does. That word, he quickly, it's a response of haste. It's an indicator that there was something that arrested his attention to a way that he instantly transitioned because of God's glory. But before his goodness, the text says he bowed his head. He physically lowered himself to a position of one in need. And moving beyond that, it says he worshiped, buried his face in the ground. Perhaps this is why worship in spirit is hard, because maybe we don't do as well as we should at preparing our mind to be in the presence of a God like that. Because what we learn in Exodus 34 is that when we really know the God of all glory, goodness, and holiness, worship is a natural response. It doesn't take effort. It doesn't even take a decision. There is no decision. When I am face to face in the presence of, before the throne of, when I am in the presence of a God that I really, really know, I worship. I don't choose to. I'm not forced to. It is a natural expression of being in the presence of a great God that I am here with. And that helps us, I think, but it also challenges us. Because that's the investment beforehand that really is kind of difficult for us. So we put it all together and we now understand what worship is. It's the reverent sacrifice of all that I am. Every piece of me in grateful praise to a God who deserves it according to the way He told me He wanted it. Maybe more simply, when I know all of Him, I'm going to give Him all of me. And in essence, that's worship, at least in concept. But our purpose is to think about family, home. How might we go about preparing our minds in a better way for that reality? What's that look like? I'll offer some suggestions. I welcome any more. Consider one thing we can do to maybe get around this hustle and bustle and this eagerness to get to a house of worship. And perhaps one way that we can help ourselves is to watch our mouths. Again, no perfection here. Let's avoid speaking of worship as a location. I kind of hope that beginning today you will never again go to church. In fact, I hope you never go to worship. But I hope you go worship God. Right? We tend to restrict, we describe worship as a location. I'm going to, and perhaps we create a mindset that is challenging for us to overcome. Jesus says, no, it's not going to be on this mountain or that mountain. Location doesn't matter. Don't think you're going to worship. It's perhaps that would help us. Just a subtle idea. Here's maybe a better one. that I came up with anyway. Change your calendar. Change your calendar. High on my list of failures as a parent is this one. It's high. I was neglectful. Why wait for Sunday to worship? Why do we do that? Did you hear what Jesus said in that John 4 passage? All these ideas really come out of there. Jesus said, the hour is coming and now is here when true worshipers fill in the blank. True worshipers will worship. You notice what he didn't say? True worshipers will worship on the first day of the week. He didn't say that. Now that is the prescribed day of corporate Christian assembly, and that's irrefutable. But true worshipers will worship. Make worship a daily thing. Worship is a manifestation of the greatness of God. And if I know a great God every day, according to Exodus 34, what will I do in the presence of a great God? I will worship. So what's that mean for us? Well, make your home a place where God is known. Study the Bible together. Make your home a place where God is honored. Pray to Him. Make our homes a place where God is praised. Sing to Him. Now, if you have a daily, not necessarily elaborate, but consistent time where a family learns from God, prays to God, and sings to God, what is that? That's worship. And you do that every day. What are we cultivating in the hearts of our own selves, our minds, and our families? And, I suppose you can even do most of that driving down a road. Here's another one, elevator standard. Worship's not about entertainment, what we get. It's not about preference, what we want. It's really about what we give, spirit, and what God wants, truth. Sometimes was the sermon good? Don't answer that today, but there will be times where we're tempted to do that. Was this good? Was that good? Well, was it what God had wanted, and did I give myself to Him in the process? And maybe that helps us, but really here's where I want us to be. Recognize the value of worship. Worship does a lot of things, and it does a lot of things that we give little attention to. And if you kind of back up, get out of the ground level of John 4 and look at the whole chapter from a 30,000 feet level, you see some things. The emphasis on worship leaps off the page when you're studying that chapter, but some of the ideas don't. And I would offer to you that this is not why John 4 was written, it's about Jesus, but we can learn some things. Worship gives us a proper view of ourselves. And what that amounts to is it robs our heart of any favoritism or prejudice. The disciples come back and they see Jesus, a Jew, talking to a woman who's a Samaritan, and they are knocked off of their socks. They're out of their socks, I suppose. Verse 27, they saw Him talking to a woman, and they were amazed. Worship does that for us. It reorients us in a way that we see ourselves in the right light in the eyes of God, and that changes how we see everybody else. Second thing worship does, it resets our priorities. In verse number 28, the woman left her water pot. The very physical necessity she was there to do, she left. And that's because she found herself in the presence of deity, of the Lord. Well, shouldn't we? It resets our priorities. Life is not about physical satisfaction. It's about something much, much greater. And to this end, let me kind of throw in, I guess, the necessary passage when you're talking about worship, which is Hebrews 10, 24 and 25. Don't forsake, neglect the assembling of yourselves together, as is the habit of some. But why? Well, in the context of a home, let me offer this to you, because our families really need to know. I mean, altogether know. There is nothing in my life that is more important than God. No job's more important. No hobby's more important. No minor ailment's more important. Certainly no athletic competition is more important. You keep running down that list. My family needs to know there is nothing in my life that's more important than God. And when I have an opportunity to go and be in His presence and do it the way He prescribed, I am eager to do it, and you don't have to ask me twice. So you got to think about when we form that habit, and I mean, I can tell by looking around the room, you don't have a habit. But when we form that habit, what have we allowed ourselves to do? It helps our priorities. It also helps us with morality. The conversation preceding this is all many of the Samaritans believed because of the woman and what she said about Jesus, but many more believed because of what He said and what He showed. Worship gives us comprehension of who Jesus is. There's one more thing it does. It inspires evangelism. Lift up your eyes, look, because the fields are white for harvest. And worship helps us do that. So let me ask you, in a kind of a Christian home, do we want our homes to be ones where favoritism and prejudice don't exist? That prioritize God, that prioritize holiness, that have an eternal purpose, that really know and understand, adore, and honor Jesus, and that are evangelistic? Well, you know what helps us do? No wonder the Hebrews passage says, let us encourage one another, provoke one another, stir up to love and good works. Worship is a valuable thing, and maybe if we had homes where we weren't so eager to go to a building, but to go to the throne of God, where our lives would be blessed, our churches would be blessed, and our families will be blessed. So the question was, imagine if worship drove us someplace other than a building. Well, I think worship does drive us there. And I pray that the study that you do after this class will be much more helpful to you than the study in this class. Because I firmly believe it. When we know God, we will honor, praise, and worship Him. And that's not because He needs it. Who needs it? We do. Worship's not designed for God. He designed worship for us. And that's true as an individual. That's true as a family. And with that, let's spend a few moments and collect our minds and worship Him in the next hour. I think our time is up. Thank you for your participation and your help today.
We hope that you enjoyed today's broadcast, brought to you by the Richmond Church of Christ. We are located at 1500 Lancaster Road in Richmond, Kentucky. We meet at 9 a.m. each Sunday morning for Bible class, followed by our morning worship service held at 10 a.m. Our Sunday evening service is held at 6 p.m. Our midweek Bible study is held on Wednesday at 7 p.m. We have Bible classes available for all ages on Sunday mornings and Wednesday evenings. If you are in the area, we would love to have you as our honored guest. If you're looking for a home church, we would love to make you part of our family here in Richmond. We hope this has been a blessing to you and pray that you have been strengthened and encouraged. Have a blessed day.